this is Corral again, and this time we're going to be talking about a 5-paragraph essay. Once again, I shouldn't say this time we're going to be talking about something different. In that respect, something different, no. In that respect, but what we're going to be talking about is a 5-paragraph essay, but this time it's going to be a different kind of essay. It's an essay of cause and effect, okay? That is, you look at something and the effect of that thing you're looking at. But once again, I don't like my students always just to give me a pure cause and effect. I want them to try to persuade me, because that puts another layer in which you have to do analysis and maybe even some research. So let me see what I'm going to try to persuade you of. I'm going to try to persuade you that poverty or being poor in itself is not bad. It's not the best thing in the world, let's not lie, but it's not bad. But I argue that if you live in a society where poverty and dehumanization takes place, that's the killer, the dehumanization. And when I say dehumanization, let me give you one example that I think everybody would understand. Racism. But not necessarily just racism, because it could be sexism. It could be being against someone because they are a particular sexual orientation. It could be being against a group of people because they look a particular way. I'm not talking about the race, I'm not talking about the gender, I'm not talking about one's sexual orientation, but because one is not perceived as pretty or cute or handsome, one is perceived as ugly. So I argue that poverty, yes, is bad in the sense that you don't have any money, but that in itself is not the determining factor. Poverty plus dehumanization has effects that are very detrimental. And I argue not only to that person or people that we're talking about, but also to society, right? So this is a cause and effect. So I'm arguing that poverty, once again, I'm not going to be writing in a sentence. I'm not writing in a sentence for the sake of time. But when you do this and you're writing a 5-paragraph outline, essay outline, you do write it in a sentence. So I'm saying poverty in itself is not the cause of many of the things that we fought poverty for, or for which we fought poverty. But it's poverty and dehumanization. Okay? And if you want to put it in a more concrete way of looking at it, you can look at either poverty and racism, poverty and sexism, okay, poverty and whatever it is your sexual orientation is. Okay, so I argue that these two factors must be present, not just poverty in itself. Why? Because when someone is poor and they're also dehumanized in a society or in a family or whatever, you treat that person in a way that says you don't deserve anything. So a society, for example, let's say there's a section that's considered poor in a city, un barrio, no, that's considered poor. So what does the government do? Is it doing this only because they're poor, or they believe that these people are less than human? So, number one, bad schools. Right? Bad schools. Bad schools mean that maybe the building itself is not good, but it also could mean that the teachers that are sent there are horrible or not the best. Right? Or you send people there who not just intellectually, but socially and culturally and emotionally and all those leads, treat the less than human, and letting the student know and reinforcing to the student, you're not worth anything. And the education that we're giving you is being wasted. So we're not going to give you the best education. Number two, when you talk about other government services. So what other areas that may be poor, but those areas are not dehumanized for whatever reason, they get government services, very simple government services, like the garbage is picked up, the streets are kept clean, right? The police are there to help the residents, not to harass the residents. These are all 3 points that you can eventually use when you're doing these essays, right? For your 3 points, right? So, once again, what's keeping the community down is not the fact that the community or the people in that community are poor, is that they are not considered worthy of certain government services. Number 3, but of course we can have many, many more, right? The legal system is made or is constructed in such a way, so I'm going to put down here legal system. And we're basically talking about criminal versus civil, but even civil. The legal system is made in such a way that when you commit a crime, it's perceived as worse than when someone else commits that same crime, but that someone else does not belong to your group. Right? So you go to jail for a longer period of time, or you go to jail where maybe someone else who committed that same crime or maybe even a worse crime doesn't go to jail. Right? It's not always necessarily because you are poor. It's that your particular group is dehumanized, and therefore they are considered less than, and therefore anything that they do is worse than, let's say, someone else of another group that maybe could be as poor or worse. So once again, we're talking about effect and consequences, right? Cause and effect, cause and effect. And we're talking about consequences. So my thesis is not just that poverty, it has a lot of consequences, which it does, okay, all right. But that in itself is not the reason for a lot of problems in society. I say that the cause is poverty and the dehumanization of the people who are poor. And that can have three detrimental effects. Bad schools, government services which are very wanting, and a legal system which is constructed to punish you more than, let's say, it would punish someone else. Okay. Now you can see on the board that I don't have these written in sentences, but you must write these in sentences when you're doing a 5-paragraph essay outline, and from that outline you write your essay. Now what you do is you take point number 1 about bad schools, right? So this is point 1. You know, bad schools. Give me 3 points of support that how poverty and dehumanization, bad schools can lead, as a result of poverty and dehumanization, bad schools are a result. And what does that mean? Bad teachers, bad curriculum, so you don't even learn to have the opportunity to learn the same things that people who live in other communities learn. So 3 points. 1, 2, 3. Then we're talking about government services, right? Because you'd be amazed how just what we consider very minor government services makes one feel about one's community. When your community is clean, You feel good about your community. When your community is protected, you feel good about your community. You don't feel as if you're just a throwaway community, right? When your community gets services, let's say it snows, like in Manhattan, right? And your community gets services, like Manhattan gets services, you feel good about your community. So you have 3 points. 1, 2, 3. But you don't get those services. Then we talk about the legal system and how you're punished if you live in a particular community more than someone else is because of the dehumanizing manner in which you're treated. 1, 2, 3. Once again, what does this mean? You're writing an essay, which is tight. And remember, these 3 points that we have under each major subthesis, each subthesis, which is point 1, point 2, and point 3, have 3 points. Those 3 points only support the points, point 1, or only support point 2, or only support point 3. You have a tight, clean, well-organized 5-paragraph essay. And all you have to do is conclude, and you have written a persuasive cause and effect essay. Don't be afraid to do research in order to make your points. The more research you do, the stronger your points. And then you can cite if you do an MLA format or if you do an APA format, just learn how you can go on a computer, find that very easily, and you will have a strong A paper. Thank you very much.